I am greatly honored today to be with the wonderful Nic Johnson. My name is Nic Harding, and this is the TFH Leadership Interview. Nic, it's great to be with you. You are the senior pastor of Long Lane Church, or otherwise known as The Lane. As people will hear very quickly, once you start talking, they will know that you are not from around here, but you are in fact a Geordie. And my first question would be, how on earth did a Geordie end up in Liverpool?
Thanks, Nick. I mean, I hate to correct you, but I love doing that, really. I'm no longer the senior pastor. And we'll get to that, I think, when we get to vision.
Okay, they finally fired you.
They fired me, yeah. No, we have promoted from within. So I'm now CoPastor with Rob, and I'll tell you more about that later. And I'm not a Geordie. I'm actually a monkey hanger. I'm from Hartlepool, who were horribly knocked out of the cup yesterday. But that's another matter completely.
How wrong could I be?
I know. Look at that. You've only known me 15 years. I sound a little bit husky today as well. I've had a bit of a cold, and I've had a tooth out this morning. But apart from that, I'm in perfect health. So I'm originally from Hartlepool, County Durham. Somewhere between Middlesbrough and Sunderland on that beautiful northeast coast. I left the northeast, so I left Hartlepool anyway when I was 24. I've been a Christian a few months and needed to get out of the lifestyle and the culture that I was in, and headed for London. And since then, I've lived all over the country. So I have lived in Newcastle for a few years. I've lived in Manchester. I've lived in London. I've lived in Buckinghamshire. Hertfordshire for a bit, and for the last 15 years, I am a Scouser. I am a Scouser now. I love Liverpool. I realised quite recently that it's overtaken my favourite city, which was Newcastle. So that tells you something, doesn't it?
Let me just jump in there for a moment, Nic. What is it you love about Liverpool?
Oh, it's been fantastic for me and my family. So my kids have grown up here, so they've thrived in the schools. We live really close to the river, which is a beautiful place to live. The comedy, it's very similar to the northeastern kind of slightly sarcastic, joyful. Everyone's got a one-liner. Everything about the city is great.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
A lot about the city is great.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. It's nowhere else I'd rather be in the world.
Yeah, amen. Yeah.
So carry on. You how did you end up in Liverpool?
Yeah, so we it's one of those long stories, but I know you've got a bit of time, so you want to hear it, don't you? So I became a Christian at 24. I'm from a really strong Christian family. I've got really strong Christian heritage. Mum, grandma, great grandma, all lovely Christians. But I was off the tracks from 15 to 24, nowhere really spiritually. And then I had an incredible encounter with God. I heard his voice. He said, "You're not hot and you're not cold, but you're lukewarm. I'm going to spit you out."
Wow.
Which is Revelation 3. I don't think I'd read Revelation 3 at that point in my life, but I heard the voice. If you'd been sat next to me, you'd have heard the voice. It wasn't just a vague impression. I asked, well, okay, God, if you're there, do something. And my life changed almost immediately. I was quite depressed. I was close to being alcoholic. Life was miserable, and it changed completely. And within weeks, I realized I needed to get out of the lifestyle I was in and get away from the people that were perhaps dragging me back into that partying lifestyle. I was a nurse. I was a trained nurse. So I got a job in London on the children's ward. And so kind of life changed from there on. It wasn't long before I met my wife, Ange. She's originally from the northwest, so she's from this neighborhood, and we ended up in youth work. And being in youth work, Ange gets the call one day to say, would we be involved in MCYC, Merseyside Christian Youth Camps? So at this point, we live in Newcastle. So we're living in Newcastle. Been married a few years. She says, "Yeah, okay, we'll come." She'd done that as a youth and as a young adult. And so I'd never been to camp, but we went MCYC together. And on that week of camp, we met a lady from Long Lane Church. I met a few people from Long Lane Church, but met this one particular lady. And fast forward about 8 years later, she rang us to say, "Our church is looking for a pastor. Would you think about coming?" So a few leaps there, Nick, but essentially
Mm.
You meet somebody, and
Mm.
and you kind of lay dormant in their thoughts in some way, but eventually God goes, ask those guys. And
Mm.
we said, absolutely not.
So am I right in thinking, Nic, that your church involvement before here was in a Pentecostal church?
Yeah, so we were we've lived in a few places, as I said. So we were in a Baptist church when we were first married. We were in a Baptist church in Solihull, Shirley Baptist Church, and it was just at the time of Toronto, and there was a little group in the church who were kind of going through some renewal and looking for more of the Spirit, and we were like, oh, we'll have a bit of that. So we got involved in this kind of not they weren't a breakaway from the church, but just kind of engaging with more of the Spirit. And in that time, we actually moved to Newcastle, and we ended up in one of Ken Gott's churches up in Newcastle, which was bonkers, absolutely bonkers. Assemblies of God, but and on acid. I would describe it as, it was just crazy, but great for us. First opportunities in church leadership. We were kind of part of the youth team. Brilliant. And then from there, I went to train for the ministry in London, and we ended up in King's Church, Amersham, which is, I think it's New Wine now, but in those days, just independent charismatic church. So I would always say my kind of spiritual formation was in the AOG and the New Church Charismatics. And then Long Lane called us, and they were brethren. So that was a laugh, wasn't it?
That was a very unexpected segue.
Yeah. So my Ange, my wife, who grew up going to a Brethren church, was initially, no way. There's no way we're going back to silent women in hats and all that stuff. And but we were looking. We knew God was moving us. I was associate pastor in my church in Amersham. The boss wasn't about to retire. He wasn't about to move on. So I wanted to lead. And so and we'd applied for a few things, and every door had been closed. And then our friend Jan rang us. So we thought, well, it's close to Angie's mum and dad, so it's a nice weekend away. We'll go and see the family in Warrington, and we'll nip over the border to Liverpool and see what it's all about. And we had a great weekend with the leadership team, and came and that first weekend, there was a lady leading worship, there was a lady preaching. You think, oh well, actually they've moved on a lot here from perhaps Angie's experience of her youth. So
wow, yeah, and somehow they've survived you.
They have, yeah. They've thrived as well. I mean, they all talk like me now, which is part of the part of the membership prerequisite. You have to sound like you're from the northeast. But we've tripled in size in those 15 years. Within 5 years, we'd moved from our building into the local school. So we still have a building where we do all of our youth work, kids work, CAP, counselling, all that kind of stuff. But on a Sunday morning, we meet in the local school because we've just got too many people, too many young people in particular. So it's been fantastic.
So it sounds like a really exciting roller coaster ride, Nic. And
roller coasters, exciting some of the time.
Yeah,
challenging some of the time.
Everybody in church leadership knows it has its ups and downs. I'm kind of wondering, over the years, what do you feel what about perhaps some of the key things that you've learned that if you would like to tell yourself 15 years ago to prepare for what was to come, what would you want to say to yourself?
Yeah, stay in the NHS. No, I think it's kind of choose your battles carefully. So I think that there's often things that you really need to get hold of and bring change to, and sometimes we've done that right, and sometimes we've done it badly. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. So there's joy there as well. But I think there's, especially as a younger pastor, there's often the temptation to like hit the fly with a hammer sort of thing. And I think often a quiet word, a conversation is so much better than kind of some sort of broad spread. This is what we're doing. I think being nuanced is the deal, really. That's the big learning. Yeah,
very good. The whole thing about failure is so important, isn't it? I remember my pastor when I was in my 20s saying, if you'd never made a mistake, you've never made anything, which always stuck with me. And I had a vicar I was speaking to recently who said every week he asked his kid, okay, kids, they're teenagers, okay, kids, what have you failed at this week? Because if you haven't failed at something, you're not trying enough.
Yeah.
I just thought,
That's right.
failure is a part of life, isn't it? And we have to learn from it and grow through it.
And I think the older you get, the more you're reticent to try new things because you don't want to fail because you've forgotten how good the failures were. And it's keeping fresh on that, going, let's try that. We love an experiment at the Lane, so we'll often say, we're just going to experiment with this. So, and that seems to do a great job of people going, oh, well, if it doesn't work, we'll stop doing it. And there's been lots of things that haven't worked and we've stopped doing, and other things that have been fantastic and have really brought life and hope.
Does that anything come to mind as if you were to write the book of your biggest failures? What would be the first chapter, or the biggest mistakes? Can you anything particularly come to mind that you're willing to say publicly?
Yes, it's generally involve people, don't they? So that's I think I'm an external processor, so sometimes I bring that to other people's lives, and that's not always helpful for people who are internal processors. So sometimes you have to think, use your inside voice, Nick, and I haven't got one, so that's quite difficult. Like, use your inside voice, don't say that out loud until you've thought it through and prayed it through. And my co-pastor Rob, he could tell you many a story of me going, absolutely not, and within 25 minutes, well, that was my idea, we should do that. So I am incredibly frustrating to work with. So I think most of the failures, if you like, are around my own personality and character, I think.
In what ways do you think your character has had to grow and develop in the last 15 years?
Learn to shut up, which is often difficult. I think I have learned that God is I forget who says it, but he's a 3 mile an hour God. And it's the thing that I've learned actually from you and from Bill Bygroves, interestingly, kind of both on the different ends of the spectrum of evangelical churches in Merseyside, is you have to be in it for the long haul. And if you're in it for the long haul, you will see change and you will see blessing. And pastors do their best work between 4 and 14 years, something like that. And so but most last 4.5 years, they don't see the 50-year fruit and the joy and all that stuff. So I think that the challenge is to keep going, and unless you've got a clear call to go somewhere else, you stick with your last orders, and the last orders have always been be the pastor at the Lane. And until the Lord calls me to do something else, I'll keep doing that.
So we'll come on to this curious and intriguing change of leadership that you've gone through, Nick, in a moment. But I also know that you're, as a pastor, you're very much for working with other churches, which is obviously at the heart of what Together for the Harvest is about. And can you just give us a couple of examples of things you've done over the years working with other churches locally?
Yeah, I mean, we just love that. I think we have been a church that could have done it all ourselves for quite a lot of years now, but we've always felt like that's not the right thing to do. That's there's a blessing commanded where you do things together. So most recently has been our fantastic drive-in carol service with Andy Radford and our friends at St Hilda's in Hunts Cross, and we've basically, over the last 2 Christmases, partly because of COVID, well, initially because of COVID, we've gone, well, come on, let's do this outside. And so we've hired in a big PA system and generators, and we're very fortunate to have a guy called Gareth Dublin, who's our sound guru, who makes all those things happen for us. And we've had some very cold carol singers and musicians, but it's been brilliant. And to do that together has been awesome, because you get input from both churches, or from more than 2 churches, and it's been great. And then one of our big joys has been our fun day that we ran in Garston for lots of years before lockdown. But we did 9 or 10 of them in a row, and we spearheaded that. We led that, but that was with all the local churches, Catholic, Methodist, conservative, evangelical, whatever we are, all, excuse me, all invited in to take a role. So we split things up and said, well, if you do that and you do that and you do that, and we had around 3,000 people come to the last few. So really, really joyful, great fun. Just not particularly gospel in terms of a preach, but gospel in terms of this is good news for the community.
Yeah, wonderful, brilliant. And we hear so many good reports of that when you do stuff like that, Nic. It's brilliant. You mentioned lockdown a couple of times. Just really wondering how you have navigated coming out of lockdown and how you found that, and maybe at a personal level. I think many leaders have found it really difficult. Obviously, lockdown itself was difficult enough, but then the sort of the transition of coming out and managing everyone's expectations and who's turning up and all that kind of stuff. What's your experience been like?
Yeah, it's been really hard, hasn't it? I think anybody who leads anything, church, secular, whatever, it's been difficult because you're trying to look after the people who have never worn a mask, don't want to get vaccinated, and just want to skip through, ITU, versus those who will wear a mask when they go to bed. It's like you've got these two extremes, and we've kind of been middle of the road anyway, all the way through. We've kind of taken the government's advice. We're not stretching it too far. I mean, you know me, Nick. I don't really like obeying by the rules, but mostly doing as we're told. So coming out, we've followed the advice. The meeting in the school helps because we've got lots of space. Excuse me, losing my voice. Lots of space, lots of good airflow. So all first few weeks we had the doors open and telling people to come with their coats on. But I quite enjoyed lockdown. I know you shouldn't say that too loud, but I quite enjoyed it because I went back to being the person that God called me to be. I was preaching every week, on video, but we went through Revelation during lockdown because it was suitable, and I was knocking on people's doors, and you weren't allowed to go in, but I was walking the streets, just seeing 80% of the lane live within a couple of miles of my house, just going visiting people. So that was in some ways fantastic. So coming back out of that, it's been a time of change, but we've been going through a time of change anyway as a church. So in some ways, those two things have gone together.
Wow. And you've changed a lot as a church. You've just mentioned that, and you've gone from your own building to a rented building. What about the future, Nic? What are your hopes? And
we're constantly, might be the wrong phrase, but we are periodically looking for a space of our own. So at the moment we are at capacity. So we run Christians Against Poverty is one of our fantastic ministries that we're involved in. We have a great CAP team, both paid and voluntary. But off the back of that, we'd love to have a clothes exchange and a food pantry and all the job club and all the things that come with that, a men's shed, all those bits. And we don't have any space to do that. We don't have any days to do that, never mind space, because every day at the church is being used. So we're always looking for a building. And a couple of times over the last 10 years, we've thought we found somewhere. If you've seen the new Lidl in Garston, we thought we'd found that, but they had more money than us. And so we're always looking for that opportunity. But if it doesn't come, we'll keep serving, to the limit that we can right now. But we're always looking in terms of, physical space would be brilliant for us. But we don't want to leave the parish. We don't want to leave the lane. Is it's been in L19 since 1930. So 1926. We think we were launched as a plant from another Brethren church somewhere in the city. So we want to stay local. That's a challenge. So the physical vision is for somewhere more permanent, but the spiritual vision never changes. I'm not great at logos and one-liners and mission statements, because I never remember them. But I just love that stuff that Jesus says. I love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself, and go and tell people. So the great commandment and the great commission, I think, will always be our vision. Like let's be part of this.
You can't go wrong, can you?
No, I guess not. And we can sometimes try and rewrite it, and actually often fail. So
yeah, very good. One of the things you are known for, Nic, is your motorbikes. Are you still riding one?
Oh yeah, Triumph. Yeah, I've had a Triumph. There's only two biblical motorcycles, isn't there? Although my friend says Kawasaki speaking in tongues, so that's all right.
He leads us in his Triumph. Yes, that's very true. Yeah. What's the other one?
Victory. There's a motorcycle
okay.
called a Victory. So yeah.
Very good.
Danielle will be happy. Yeah.
Have you always ridden bikes?
Yeah, I mean, I was a mod when I was. I've done every kind of youth,
Incarnation
thing that you can think of. So but I was a skinhead and a mod when I was 16 and 17, and then when I trained for the ministry when I was 30, early 30s, I got a Vespa again, and then did my bike test and found that motorcycles went faster than scooters, and I've had bikes ever since.
Yeah.
So so I ride all year round. The older I get, the less inclined I am to go out in the rain, but sometimes you have to. So we've got a good group of bikers as well in both in the lane, and some of the guys locally in other churches. So Russell Kane from Gateway and I ride out together sometimes, and that's always a joy.
It's a good kind of man's thing, isn't it, to do stuff together? Yeah,
although we have got girls in our group as well, because we're like that at the lane, but we're
I'm glad to hear it. That's very good. I had a Vespa when I was 19 years old for a year or two, until I nearly killed myself on it. I went to 4 wheels after that.
Yeah, nearly killing yourself is just a rite of passage. It's like
that's true. And I did have a broken leg for 3 months, but that was probably the least thing that could have happened. So you've been part of Together for the Harvest for a long time, Nick. You've always been a supporter. I've been personally involved in one of the smaller prayer groups with you over many years, and I've valued that incredibly. I know, when I've gone through really hard times, that your support and the support of that little small prayer group have just been a lifesaver for me. Just love to hear your reflections on TFH, what you value about it, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, for me coming to the city, I was something of a conundrum, I think, for people. It's like he sounds like he's a Pentecostal, but he's come to a church that isn't. Where does this guy fit? I didn't fit with the kind of the conservative evangelical guys, because I'm this fellow who speaks in tongues and believes in prophecies. So that wasn't a natural fit there. And actually, it was you inviting me for coffee. I think you were like, "Who is this person?" And I found TFH to be home for me. Brilliant. And the kind of leaders' lunches and leaders' breakfasts and all those things have been. I love that, because you see other people. I'm a networker. I'm a people person, so I love those things just from a personality perspective. But the small prayer group that you mentioned has been it's been life at times, and when you're going through really tough stuff as a leader, and I've got good friends within the church, but you can't always share things with them because it involves them or their friends or whatever. And so to have other leaders that they're not going to solve anything for you, but they're just going to listen and pray and encourage you and ask you, in a couple of months' time, how are you getting on, and what happened with that. So that's been brilliant. So for 15 years, I've been in this small group. I think there's only you and I. Me, you, and Graham Webb are the originals. Yeah. I mean, I'm the young boy. I'm the new boy. But and we've added other guys have come and gone over the years as ministries changed. But and we still meet probably every 2 months, taking sarnies and how we do and pray together. I mean, things have changed for me in church. But when I was first in the city, the only time I was praying with people and hearing people pray in tongues was that group. And that was my norm. That I'd come from a church where everyone was speaking in tongues on a Sunday morning. Just thought it was normal. And our church has changed massively in those years. So it's not the only time I hear those gifts. I see the gifts happening. But in 2007, it was Lifeline. It was life. I think probably 3 years into being at the lane, I was ready to run. I was battered, and the honeymoon was definitely over. Everyone wanted to be the pastor except the pastor. And but Angie's, my wife is she's a warrior, and she's like, we're not leaving, we're fighting. But you guys kept me going. Really, it was fantastic. Yeah,
brilliant. You mentioned Ange there, and just tell us briefly about your family.
Yeah, so I'm married to Ange. We've been married for 29 years, something like that, a long time anyway. She's originally from Stockton Heath in Warrington. She married below her station, so some scruffy bloke from the northeast. We met in church, which is I always like to tell people that I prayed out loud so that I was a Christian. It took her a bit longer to fall in love with me, but I was straight there. And we've been all over the country. We worked for Agape, Campus Crusade for Christ, for quite a few years. So we served them in Solihull and in Newcastle. And then we went south to train for the ministry. So we've been all over the place. Got 3 adult children. So my oldest son, Jack, is he's completing his PhD in divinity at St Andrews right now. My daughter, Kate, is a missionary with YWAM in Perth, Australia, and a lockdown in paradise. And my youngest,
tough for some.
I know, serving the Lord. Go on then. She's a musician, so she's part of a creative arts ministry, like seeking to bring the gospel into the creative arts. So it's not a it's a real outreach to the
arts community,
to the arts community, which is really. She's on a team with photographers and skateboarders and rappers and all that kind of funky stuff.
Fantastic.
And then my youngest son, Harry's 19 and is working, decided university was not for him at this point in life. So he works for a local computer company.
Yeah. So are you empty nesters?
Harry still lives at home.
Okay.
And we often have people staying often. Yeah.
Brilliant. So finally, Nic, before I get you to pray for those who are listening, just tell us briefly about how you've ended up being the co-pastor from being the senior pastor.
Yeah, so 9 years ago, something like that, we employed a couple called Rob and Katie McAvoy. And it didn't take, they came as our youth pastor and our children's worker. And it didn't take long to see what gold these people were. Absolutely fantastic. And over the last few years, I've been convinced, especially through lockdown, gave me a chance to really think and pray, that I couldn't take the church any further than I'd taken it. God gives you, certain gifts and certain things, and I'm like, this is we're not going to get any further without doing something different. And there's a point where you've kind of come to the end of your different, really. So you need some help. And I'm looking at Rob in particular, thinking somebody else is going to get this guy unless we keep him. He's not going to be a youth pastor forever. He's absolutely fantastic. It's very different in personality and in gifts from me. So that really helps. I'm a preacher. He's not trying to get the preaching off me every week. He's a details, logistics, visionary guy. I'm certainly not trying to get that stuff off him. And so I started to pray, started to talk to him and our wider leadership about, what this would look like. And so in January, we had a whole change in our leadership. So we've done this twice since I've been here. So we added women to our leadership team 4 or 5 years ago, which has been an amazing change. Really, really opened up lots of things to us. And then we changed again this January. So Rob has become co-pastor with me. And we've got some distinctives in what we're leading. So we're trying to lead together. But I'll be, more kind of the teaching role. Rob will be more the logistics and the visionary role. But those things will cross over. So we're not using any of those phrases because we're just calling out you the co-pastor. And then Katie moved from kids work and she's become associate pastor doing adult ministry, and she's loving that, and it's fantastic to have a woman on as part of that team. So it's been big change, but it's been good, really good change. Yeah,
really brilliant. I mean, having worked as a co-pastor for 24 years, I know how good it can be, but it can also be challenging. So I'm going to be praying for you guys.
Thank you, appreciate that.
But I think the team you got there is amazing, so I just think sky's the limit for you, really. But one of the things that struck me, Nic, is that there aren't many leaders, senior leaders, who have either the self-awareness or the humility to recognize when they've taken a church as far as it can go. So I just want to say well done for that, and I'm praying that it will be a huge blessing for you to be able to really focus on the things that you're called and good at and enjoy doing.
I appreciate that. I think, I'm not sure, it might be humility, but that's not something I'm particularly known for. But I think it's more reality. It's like I don't feel like the Lord's calling us somewhere else. He's called me to preach. I love me preaching. And so it's like, well, who can do the other stuff? Who's you got that can bring the other things? So and something that you've really called us to as a group of churches across Merseyside is the leadership pipeline. Who's coming through, and we think about that all the time. Who's who's coming through, who's gonna lead us into this, who's gonna bring this next thing, who's gonna do this next thing badly. You know, that's one of the great joys, I think, is going, you know, I'm not sure they're going to be very good at that. Great, let's ask them.
Yeah, I can't remember whose the original quote was from, but it's I've used it many times, which is, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing badly, because you've got to be bringing those new people through. That's brilliant, Nick. Nick, thanks so much for sharing your heart, your life with us, and your honesty. It's been very refreshing. I've loved talking with you, and I'm sure others will love listening to your story and all that you've learned. Could we just close with you praying for the folks who are listening to this, the other leaders across the city? That would be brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Father God, we thank you that you've called us by name. Lord, you know right where you know who we are and where we are right now. And Lord, I pray for those who are struggling through some challenges. Lord, I pray that they would know your hand in their lives right now. And Lord, I pray for those who are on the top of the roller coaster, who are seeing real blessing. Lord, I pray that that you'd continue that, Lord, and I pray for your favor over the church across Merseyside. Thank you, Lord, that that you invite us into this incredible ministry, and we just pray, Lord, that we'd keep listening and walking in your footsteps. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Nick. Nick Johnson, thank you for doing the leadership talk today. It's been brilliant to be with you, and blessings on you, your family, and the church.
Thank you.